Good morning. Welcome to the 10:30 UED meeting. Item number 1, I call this meeting to order. Item number 2, rezoning application Z7807 from RM2 to RS5 for property located at the northeast corner of West 8th Street and South 45th West Avenue, requested by, Raul Cisneros, property owner. Oh, good grief, I'm not even going to try that one, so I apologize. And this is in Council District 2. TMAC voted 9-0 to approve RS5 zoning. Now, it looks like Susan's here. And Paulina.
I don't know if I'm going to be in second spot.
Morning,
My turn will
ladies.
come later.
Good morning. Hi, good morning. We'll pull up the map here in a second. So the zoning case, I think is pretty simple. As we do our work every day, we always notice things that we need to include as a zoning code amendment. This is a good example. So, got it. Okay. So this is a little tiny lot, or fairly small, out west off Charles Page Boulevard. So this is part of the big area in 1970 when the zoning map was amended. They changed a lot of the zoning around, I'll say around downtown broadly, to RM, even though you can tell they're primarily made up of residential, single-family lots. So this particular request is from RM2 to RS5, and here's what exactly. So, so that's exactly what we did, and realized that we need to adjust because and the reason why he needs to do it is because RM2, which of course it's a multifamily district and assumes that there'll be, multifamily product on it. The minimum lot size is 5,500 square feet. And because this is a non-conforming lot, it would only be able to have one house. But RS5 reduces the minimum to a 30-foot wide lot and 3,300 square feet. So RS5 has a smaller lot minimum than the RM2. So anyway, this is a good example of something we need to adjust. So he wants to be able to just split it into, is Councilor Dacre right here today?
She will.
She's rushing over.
Not yet, not yet.
She'll be here soon.
You're fine. Okay. So you can tell there's enough room on this lot for an extra house. It's right behind commercial, right off Charles Page Boulevard, and really pretty simple. But it does highlight something we need to look at closer.
So you're accommodating the development with this zoning?
Right.
That's really what you're doing.
We want him to be able to do an extra house on the lot that he can't right now.
Counselor?
Yes. I was looking at the map. I think this is actually in Councilor Bellis's district, not Council District 2. I think it was an old map that was in the backup documents, but so I don't have an opinion on the rezoning. I've not seen it or talked with the developer, but it would be Council District 4. I was kind of curious if someone had reached out to Councilor Bellis to talk about it.
So we, as you know, we provide notices to all cases that are going to BOA and TMAPC to the council. I send them both in an email, and we give hard copies to Simone, who distributes them. So we're hoping that when you see those, if you want more information, you reach out to us or.
Okay.
But no, we haven't heard. If you're familiar with the neighborhood, there's a lot of different things going on there. An extra house is just giving us the extra house we need, and in an area that's already an urban area.
Well, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, that is. Hold on, I'm zooming out on a map. This is District 4.
Yeah,
Thank you for your catch.
Yeah.
But with that said, I was just looking at where it is. I haven't, I know notices went out to neighbors. I haven't heard from anyone with any concerns. I'm just glad that people are investing in the area. So that sounds great.
So I do see that. Initially, we got it right, and then when we put the RFA together, we put 2, and we had it 4 currently. So we just got it wrong along the way somewhere.
Any other questions or concerns? Perfect. All right, let's move on to item 3. Resolution number 2933, 1064 of the Tulsa Metropolitan Area Planning Commission pursuant to Title 19 Oklahoma Statute, Section 863.7, amending the Tulsa Comprehensive Plan by adopting Amendment CPA 117 to the Tulsa Metropolitan Area Major Street and Highway Plan.
Okay.
Say that again.
Good morning. So, I wanted to talk just a second before we get into these amendments. I'm not sure, I'm looking around the table, I'm not sure who has really been here when we've done anything with the Major Street and Highway Plan before. The last set of amendments we did was in 2018, so I don't see like. Counselor Gilbert? Counselor Gilbert, Counselor Harper?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay,
16.
so, but it's been so long, I don't expect you to really remember. But, so the Major Street and Highway Plan, it is a part of the comprehensive plan, and that's what, this is a batch of amendments to the Major Street and Highway Plan, so it's been around a long time. It is for the Tulsa metropolitan area, more broadly, but of course, the ones we are bringing to you are focused in the city of Tulsa. So it's been around and part of the comprehensive plan since 1968. It provides for a hierarchical street classification system based on street width. So I've worked in a place before that called like a similar map, that, something like the ultimate right-of-way width, or forgot what the map, but that kind of how I always think about it. It really identifies what the ultimate width of right-of-ways are planned for. And I just want to make a distinction too, because because this got a little confusing, I think, at Planning Commission, just because it shows on the Major Street and Highway Plan that a street is, planned to be 120 feet wide, that doesn't mean that's how it's built today. So when we talk about the amendments and reducing some of that, there's no project on the ground that's going to take lanes away. It just means that in the future, we're not planning for it to be as wide as we had originally. So we'll kind of talk about that. Really, it's not amended that much. I know we feel, some of the ones we worked on, Paulina will talk about the different groupings of amendment we have. We worked on the first, we've been working on a while, because it helps kind of facilitate development if we take the roadway back. Sometimes roadway, the ultimate right-of-way is actually overlaps on existing buildings, so we don't want to see some of those buildings go away sometimes. So there's a lot of reasons. And how we use it in our office is primarily to when a plat comes through or a lot split comes through, and we need to know when those dedications are made to the city, we need to know how much of that property needs to be dedicated for the right-of-way. So we look to this map and say, okay, this map is along secondary arterial, so therefore they need to dedicate a certain amount of right-of-way. The process here for these amendments is a little different. They kind of start in different places. Ultimately, they need to go through Public Works, the city engineer, which we've worked a lot with Paul on these, so if you get into any really technical questions that we can't answer, he's here to help. But the process is it really, once it, they submit it to Public Works, they kind of make sure that they're on board with it, they're good with it. We look at a lot of things, Pauline will talk about some of those. And then it goes to INCOG, a Transportation Technical Advisory Committee, and a Policy Committee to make recommendations on it, because it is part of that broader Tulsa metropolitan area Major Street and Highway Plan. So it goes there, and then it goes to the Planning Commission, and then it goes to City Council. So these are basically all scattered along amongst the city. You have some kind of in the core, the blue ones. Pauline will talk about those. Some far east, and then you have the South Tulsa Bridge in the south. So she'll kind of talk through them in general ways, and then you can ask us as specific questions as you want to.
Okay, thank you, Susan. So, as Susan mentioned, we grouped them by area, basically, and the first group of amendments presented by Public Works, we looked at 3 corridors, including a segment on Charles Page Boulevard, Easter Street, and Route 66, along a portion of 11th Street, Admiral Boulevard, and Admiral Place. And what we did is we looked at historic annual average daily traffic data all the way back to the 90s, which is what we had available to revise roadway capacity, and we identified a clear downtrend. The current Major Street and Highway Plan classifications tend to account for increasing vehicular traffic, when in reality it's showing low existing and future traffic volumes per the data. We also looked at documents that support these amendments, including 2 multimodal level of service studies and the Crosby Heights Small Area Plan that makes this recommendation. In addition, current right-of-way widths discourage infill along these corridors, which we have already identified for their potential for transit and pedestrian-oriented development, as well as historic preservation, economic growth, tourism. And keep in mind that, as Susan mentioned, the amendments propose reducing the prescribed right-of-way on the major street and highway plan, not reducing or modifying our current Bill Street configurations. Now, the next 2 groups go hand in hand for their goals and due to them being adjacent. So Project Anthem and the Robson Ranch are located on the far east end of Tulsa. And the primary landowner of the area developed a comprehensive plan for Fair Oaks and a master plan proposal for the 7,000-acre core of the Robson Ranch property, which seeks to transform the area into a mixed-use, walkable, environmentally friendly community. Now, the land use in these planning documents were included in the Planet Tulsa Comprehensive Plan Update, which was adopted in 2023, and the area currently remains mostly undeveloped. The Major Street and Highway Plan currently does not consider the geographic and environmental features of the area, which are very unique, and it does not align with the land use and development goals for the area as well. Now, the next project is, or the next group, sorry, is the Route 666 Riverside 1, and the amendments are going to allow for more developable space and encourage infill and more walkable development with no effect on existing roadway configurations. So projects like, for example, the Crybaby Hill development and the OSU Medical Center would especially benefit from these amendments. Now, roadway capacity along the segments is expected to remain reasonable for forecasted travel demand based on, again, Federal Highway Administration standards. Now, for our last set of amendments, District 8 Councilor, surrounding municipalities and residents have had many discussions regarding the alignment of the bridge throughout the years. And 5 entities, including like the Muskogee Nation, City of Bixby, City of Jenks, and City of Tulsa, funded a South Tulsa Bridge sketch level and toll revenue study, and that also calls for the amendment. So the current Major Street and Highway Plan alignment is on Yale, and the proposed alignment would be an extension of Riverside Parkway, which considers the surrounding road infrastructure within City of Tulsa limits. So on March 19th of this year, the TMAPC unanimously voted to adopt the amendments to the Tulsa Metropolitan Area Major Street and Highway Plan. So are there any questions?
Questions? Paul, do you have anything to add from an engineering standpoint? I love how the tables got turned here.
Paul Zachary, Public Works. No.
That was a lot of information.
All the way up here.
I know, I'm like.
Said
I
no
was-
from back then.
It has been a long time, and these have come up repeatedly as we work with development services and with planning office. Having right-of-way ultimately through existing building stock that has been there since 50s, 60s, and even before in some of the old, we were having to do one-off exceptions. We would be closing easements, we would be closing right-of-way, and it was like, this is just systemic along these entire corridors. So in looking at all the data, one of our criteria from the transportation side is looking at projected growth, what's going to happen. And as Paulina said, when we started looking at the data, we're actually seeing it decline in the area, in these areas, and the street capacity that we have built currently supports that. Or if it's not built that way now, the ultimate projected need for traffic fits within a lesser designation, which also carried a lesser right-of-way width, and what basically a burden on the redevelopment of this. So we wholeheartedly agree with all these we've gone through. There are some that didn't meet, that we talked about doing, that are issues, and they're gonna remain to have to be dealt with on one-off type deals. But the ones that could, and that were very clear that we could do this, this is what you have on here, and this is the consensus, as you said. The policy committee at NCOG, the technical committee, all of them were unanimous on all these. And I don't think we talked about, there's a couple outside the Inola and around a new development area out there. So, but this is a good thing. It's overdue. I'm sorry that Counselor District 8 isn't here. His request, ever since we talked about the South Tulsa Bridge, this was a result of the discussion and coordination with the neighborhood and their wish not to have Yale. We did the traffic studies. We showed the traffic going up Riverside Drive or actually going back towards the east, and it was best suited to close off Yale and direct it towards Riverside Drive, which was Riverside Parkway, which was more apt to carry that traffic. So I think we've caught up. I don't believe there's any other outstanding requests that we didn't vet that are still on somebody's desk right now. So we're good. We're probably good for another 8 years, maybe. But, some of these have been going on, have been cooking a lot longer than that. And it's just been, this was just a good time to do it. Susan and Pauline have just been great to work with on this, and we provided it. And like you said, getting the unanimous out of all the groups that have heard it should say something to you all.
Quite a hurdle.
So, other than that, I don't have any other comments, counselors. No.
Jack, did you have something?
Just quickly, a note on comprehensive plan amendments. So by statute, the council can approve the proposed amendments or send them back to the planning commission for further consideration. But if you take no action within 45 days, they'll be deemed approved. So it's an unusual twist for comp plan amendments, just to make you aware of that. Doesn't sound like it'll be an issue here, but for future reference.
We'll send it back.
Thanks, Jack. Counselors, any questions or comments? Go ahead.
So I thought it was interesting, this is not really a question, but just an observation on the first project along Charles Page, Route 66. If I heard you right, when comparing traffic volume from the 90s on to, maybe 2025, we see less volume
Yes.
of traffic. Wow.
Yeah, so we've been we got data all the way to the 90s, and we evaluated like the data by year, and like, the chart is interesting because it's like it spikes, it goes down, spikes, go down, because there could be a project that opened in the area, it could be that the street was closed, it could be COVID, there's many reasons, but
Guild
when
Crease.
connecting all of those points,
Right,
there's
the transit.
It's the Gilcrease Expressway. I mean, that does lead to one quick curiosity. Since we know that will continue to evolve specifically in the Charles Page area, like just forecasting, which again, we can revisit this in 8 years, but, or sooner, but I was just checking if that, those projections around that shifting traffic pattern that we've also looked at this table factors into this.
When we look at our long-range transportation plan goes out 2045, 2050, and that's done separate from this. The built road out there, like on Charles Page and it's a 4-lane facility. We didn't, if it was coming down or it was even close to the capacity of that street. So we have good levels of service that can actually, if that trended up a little bit, we're still well within the built, what we have out there. So we have some margin. If it was close or something very close, there was no advantage to us to clip our ability to enlarge. But most of these roads are pretty much at their built capacity. And if we were gonna have to widen out there, what we saw in the growth patterns, it wouldn't justify us going out there and spending all that money to widen it. We would do it by other methods. So I believe we're well within. And,
Well, and I'm personally opposed to road widening mostly, so.
No,
yeah.
but the main.
Unless it helps Counselor Bush bike on it. yeah.
Right, but if we're lowering a road from a primary arterial from 120 feet to 100 feet, that's really just 10 feet either side. So we could still add a right turn lane or add something to do it, but it was really creating more of an issue for the private property owner not to have his parking had to be within an easement or his building setbacks were a problem. So it it's really, I think we've got a good dovetail with the solutions for this one.
And I'll clarify my statement. I'm fine with some of that type of road widening for just like safety, accessibility, pedestrian safety purposes, but what happened on South Yale, Phil's not here to defend it. I don't like, anyway,
How often do you
next.
drive that stretch of road?
As rarely as possible too,
For
it's too
those
far
of us that
south.
drive it,
It's
it was
nice.
necessary.
It's necessary.
Yeah, but to your point, where traffic has declined, that traffic has shifted to
Yeah.
another location.
Yeah.
So we need, I
That's
would
worth the
be
widening
careful.
for Sheridan, that's planned.
That's what I'm saying, so be careful about what you're saying.
If you build it, they will come.
If you're gonna
Just get
put
more traffic.
3,000
Oh my
apartments in
gosh,
a
not that
corridor, you
one.
gotta
You gotta have
minimize traffic.
Counselors, any other comments?
Oh my
We'll put it on for
Questions?
debate next time.
If just
Yeah.
everyone biked.
Yeah.
I'm just.
Have you been on that hill?
Okay,
I think only Carol Bush can make that.
I can make that.
let's move on to item 4. Ordinance amending the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget to make supplemental appropriations of $300,000 recognized from Ramona appropriated fund balance within the general fund, interest earnings to cover arbitrage obligation. Morning, Jared.
Morning, Jared Moore from Budget.
Everybody leaves for this one.
You know, it might imply this is not interesting,
It's interesting to me, it's money.
but it doesn't bother me. So this is a budget action appropriating $300,000 from the general fund to pay arbitrage obligations. Every year, obviously, this is more or less a pass-through. We earned interest proceeds off of general obligation debt over the past year, and after 3 years, we're obligated to turn over any interest we earn on those back to the IRS. And this just, interest came in higher than we had previously budgeted. So we got more money, we're turning the money back over as per law.
Okay.
Pretty simplistic. Appreciate the explanation. Any questions, comments? Perfect. All right. Item number 5, ordinance amending the fiscal year 24-25 budget to make supplemental appropriations of $154,189 recognized from unappropriated fund balance within the Vincent Creek Detention Sub-Fund. Go ahead, Jared.
This is an exciting one. I don't get to do fee and lieu often. So this is appropriating the $154,000 within Vincent Creek to do some storm detention work. They're going to replace an existing culvert with a 12x12 reinforced concrete box to convey the 100-year flow. This will be along 91st between Harvard and Yale. And essentially, these funds are what developers pay in lieu of adding these stormwater detention elements to their own projects. The city offers a offsetting payment in lieu of the tax, and so it accumulates until a need or project comes up, in which case the city will use those funds to remediate for the entire area within each flood basin.
Comments, concerns, questions? Perfect. Appreciate it, Jared. Okay, on to item number 6, ordinance amending fiscal year 24-25 budget to make supplemental appropriations of $17,100,000 from revenue received from the sale of water revenue bonds within the TMUA 2025A Water Revenue Bond Subfund, citywide automated meter reading.
This is appropriating the 17.1 million. This is kind of procedural. It's just the appropriation step after the council approved the resolution 203090 for the sale of the water and sewer bonds. This one specifically will be used to continue the AMR project.
Questions, comments? Perfect. Okay, on to item number 7, ordinance amending the fiscal year 24-25 budget to make supplemental appropriations of $19,620,000 from revenue received from the sale of sewer revenue bonds within the 2025B sewer revenue bond subfund, North Side Wastewater Treatment Plant, area-wide sewer rehab.
So this was the B issue of the other one we just talked about, and this was appropriating the $19.62 million for sewer projects. They're listed on the right. There are probably better people to explain the specifics behind them, but essentially it's all very wastewater treatment plant facility repairs, street access to dewatering facilities, and then just general rehabilitation and relief.
So you get investment. Any questions, comments? Okay. Item number 8, ordinance amending the fiscal year 24-25 budget to make supplemental appropriations of $200,000 recognized from unappropriated fund balance within the golf course fund.
Yes, sir, this is appropriating $200,000 within the golf course fund. Revenues did come in higher than originally projected. The matter of appropriation is a little bit of a timing issue. You know, we've had trouble with fleet just in general. You put in an order, you don't get your truck, your car, et cetera, for another year and a half, 2 years. Well, the golf operator ordered 2 golf carts, and they came in much sooner than they expected. So this is something they would have normally purchased in FY '26, but it came in earlier, so it is planned just a little early. And then the $30,000 is for transition-related costs, to put money in there as we transition from the previous operator to the new one that we just signed with.
Questions or comments? All you golf fans?
Yeah, Paige Belcher.
All right. Item number 9. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you all.
Appreciate you. Item number 9, resolution requesting quality event designation for the 2025 Black Wall Street Rally to be held May 15th through the 17th, 2025, identifying the city of Tulsa as the event's host community. And this comes with an emergency clause. Morning, sir.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm Brandon Jackson from Water City Partners.
Good morning.
So we're here before you today. We've been working with Matt Pinnell and the OTC in order to get our event as a designated event for Tulsa through the state. And our CVB reps, they directed us to you because we need to have this formalized in order to achieve the benefits from the Oklahoma Tax Commission.
Okay.
For the revenue that we provide to the city.
Do you have anything that you can present to us that would give us a little more background on what this will do for the city, or
Well, in the agenda-
what is exactly encompassed in the rally?
Yeah. Well, the rally is a next generation cultural motorsports event that brings
Okay.
in participants from all over the country. Last year, we had 47 states represented over multi-day activities. We are primarily focusing on financial literacy, cultural tourism, and the history of Black Wall Street. You can see all the data from the CVB on the revenues we've produced over the last few years, backed up with their data in the back of the packet.
Perfect. Any questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
We appreciate it. Okay. Item number 10, right-of-way occupancy permit between the City of Tulsa and Metro FiberNet LLC for the occupancy of all City of Tulsa rights-of-way for the purpose of placing, owning, operating, and maintaining facilities therein. I couldn't get that word out. Morning.
Morning. My name's Chris Mashburn. I'm with Public Works. And so this right-of-way occupancy permit is pursuant to the rights-of-way management ordinance, Title 11, Chapter 12. The above limited liability company is applying for a permit to occupy the public rights-of-way for the purpose of placing, owning, operating, or managing facilities therein. By approving this permit, the city is approving, or authorizing rather, the lawful use of the public rights-of-way, subject to all applicable ordinances. This application has been reviewed and accepted by all applicable departments. So we're asking for your review and application. If it meets with your approval, we recommend it to be executed.
I'm assuming this is more fiber installation?
Yes, as far as I know it, yes.
Okay. So this is the same project that AT&T just went through, where they
Just a
went through
different-
neighborhoods?
Just a different provider, yeah.
Yeah, so are they gonna attempt to, the holes that were dug in the rights of way, are they gonna attempt to reuse or not create new holes, or can they lay in parallel to where they're not intrusive?
Right, I don't have any specific plans yet from them personally, to know exactly where they're planning to go.
Okay.
This would just grant them access to utilize and be in our right of way.
Right, okay. Council.
So along this line, I had whoever was laying fiber in the Brookside area this last time around, which I'm not sure, because we had a hard time finding that out. They did it, they were not good at covering their mess.
The restoration process was
Yes.
less than stellar?
Covering the map.
Very, it was
Yes, ma'am.
horrible.
That's why I asked the question.
Right, and so.
That's true.
I don't know if you're the right person, but if we're gonna approve these things, I think there needs to be some accountability there to
Standard.
restore. Yeah, because I drove the street, it was horrible.
Who
They-
expects it? Yeah.
What,
I don't know.
maybe Jack can help us understand.
Well, there are substantive requirements in Title 12 that lay out the obligations of the right-of-way occupant.
So it's an accountability issue from their-
Inspections, resources, I mean, there are a lot of things that go into kind of following up on their obligations
Who's the inspector? Is it in our,
in the Public
of
Works
Public
Department.
Works?
Is,
So when they complete the project, so AT&T, from my understanding, did this last iteration of this work, are they required to come back to you and say, hey, we're done, and then the city comes back and inspects afterwards?
I'm relatively new to the position, so I'm
No, that's
learning
okay.
as we
That's
go.
okay if you
That's
don't know. We can,
That's, yeah,
yeah,
But-
we can pose this question to somebody who does know.
Right.
we're not picking on you,
Yeah,
we're
we're
just
not
trying to
picking at you.
learn
We're just trying to
how we can
understand.
protect our citizens from their yards being torn up.
Absolutely, right.
when we put it on a.
Mr. Zachary,
Or dry, or
Oh, okay.
He's just gonna say
There
no
he
again.
is.
Substitution?
You're letting this poor guy struggle.
That was pretty
Wait, don't
funny.
you belong over there? Don't you belong over there?
I wanted to be closer to Council District 1. Yes, Chris Mashburn, Gary McCulpin used to be in it. So on the applications and their plans, they will give us a layout of where they are going. But as we found on Brookside, if they find one obstacle, they are very creative in the fields. But as far as the restoration and those things, Chris Mashburn is where the 311 calls will come. Our inspectors will go out there. We do have the ordinances, Jack said. We do have standards for restoration. And if they are not done, we do follow up on those, and those are done through Chris's group. He is the right-of-way occupant manager, and when we talk about right-of-way, it's the right-of-way on the arterial streets. It's not the ones in the neighborhoods. With the neighborhoods, we've got another crew that deal with those folks.
Okay.
But this is arterial right-of-way inspection and occupancy. And MetroLink, I mean, they're doing work in they've done some work in the suburbs, and we know they're active in Broken Arrow as well. And so far, they've done well. But yes, if there's ever any right-of-way not restored to its right, Chris Mashburn's who's going to get the 311 call, or your folks, feel free to contact Terry. That's who Chris works for, and we will get it addressed. But yes, there is an accountability and a guideline for them to follow.
Counselor Dr. Wright.
thank you. How far in advance do your teams know you're gonna be in a certain part of town? Those two, I mean, how far in advance do you all know when those folks are gonna be in a certain part of town?
It depends.
Do you get advance notice?
Sometimes, yes,
Okay.
but sometimes
When
no.
you do, is there a way they can let us know what neighborhood or district they're gonna be in, so we don't have to wait for 311 complaints? I think it would go a long way if we could say, hey, XYZ neighborhood, there's gonna be easement work, that it's legal, because we start getting calls like, there's people digging up my yard, or digging up the driveway in front of my business, and I don't, even if they got a notice, we're gonna get those calls, so I'd rather if we could be proactive about it.
That would be.
I mean, we can say today, right, we know that there's gonna be easement work, but we don't know what areas are being targeted. So if we did know, even generally, the more we can communicate out, the more those leaders in those business districts or the neighborhoods can say, hey, it's totally okay, this is what they do, and if they don't restore whatever, let people know. I had to go through Windstream and AT&T in my district, and it was not what was happening is the contractors were tagging like the HOA page on Facebook, thinking that was notice.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's not gonna work. So, what I ended up doing is finding out who that subcontractor is, going onto their Facebook page, looking at all my neighborhoods they tagged, and then like contacted the neighborhoods, but that should not be how we're doing business. So, if you all know, if you could let our staff know, then they can dole it out to our aides and we can, strategize, especially for the counselors who have like monthly, town halls, or have monthly newsletters or whatever. We can just help communicate and take down the temperature on some of
Absolutely.
this.
I think there are different levels of permits. There's minor and then there's major permits that require a little bit more submittal. So I think definitely on the major ones, as opposed to just going from block to block, but even those,
Yeah.
we can let you guys know
I
and
think in
contact
general,
you.
yeah, I think in general on easements, right, because sometimes they're in backyards or back alleys,
Exactly.
and sometimes they're in front, and so people get real nervous about like, who are these people?
Showing up.
Especially with, there are bad actors who like to impersonate or do whatever, so, it's an opportunity to educate citizens too on like what's legal and what's
Mitigate that
allowed.
aggravation.
I mean, we know even when we're putting sidewalks into
Yes, ma'am.
neighborhoods, people are like, why are you tearing up my yard?
Yeah.
So we get to educate and go, that's,
Especially after they've seen it
that's
happen
not your yard,
once.
that's our space.
To them, it looks
With
like
your grass.
Yeah, with your grass.
surfacing the street
But you
and
have to
turning it
maintain
back
price
and
rules.
doing it again, so, yeah. we
So
wanna
as much
mitigate
as
the aggravation.
possible on these
Yeah.
right-of-way occupants, if they're on the arterial systems, when they go into the neighborhoods, those
Is
are
that a
their easements.
permit?
They don't know.
They
They
don't,
have the
yeah.
right to do that.
Yeah,
They have the
exactly.
right to do this. So this is more or less for those that are out on the arterial roadway
Mm-hmm.
system, and we can definitely do that. If we get word, even from our utility coordination, which is not in his area, if we get somebody that's active, we're gonna let the council
Mm-hmm. That'd be
districts know
helpful.
now.
That'd be
We need
great.
to, and we'll get that
And we have
communicated back through the
partners.
ranks.
Yeah, we have, government affairs liaisons at these utility companies that then we can be in contact with.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know with Cox, we definitely get a lot of engagement, so.
On some of those, unfortunately, our first notice is when we get the calls, what's going on, and then we
Sure.
find out.
It
Oh,
happens.
Cox has decided to do a rebuild in this area, and we
Yeah.
haven't mentioned it to anybody. Well,
Well,
not say Cox, but it's just like,
Yeah, it's usually the subcontractor that's shown up, and it's not even like a branded
Right.
utility
Right.
company that neighbors would recognize as
Yep.
they serve our community, so.
if it were Cox, we'd know who to call. It's when it's somebody's downline.
Yes,
Tier
yeah.
two,
And
tier
that's
three.
what happened in the Brookside area,
Yes,
when I was
ma'am.
getting those
Right.
complaints.
I think
So
most
that-
neighborhoods, that was the case.
Huh?
I think that was most neighborhoods, that was the case.
Yeah.
Subcontractors that had
Yeah,
magnetic
yeah.
signs on the
It's
side.
just, you know, some,
Angled on their
That's
vehicles.
right, you got it.
Well, and when the constituent asked who they were with, they,
they don't know.
they don't know. They're just, I don't know, we were just told to do this. It's like, well, because we figured out they were subcontractors.
Yeah, who are you doing it for?
We'll be in Texas next week.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
Sure.
So any communication of any type like that, I agree, helps us
Educate,
and take
Yeah.
the temperature down.
yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I don't want anyone getting hurt.
No?
Who doesn't like replays? Counselor Archer?
So there was a constituent, so I agree with everything that's been said. In the West Highlands neighborhood on West Tulsa, they dug up my yard and people have come to my house knocking on the door to tell me about the work that's been happening. One individual, they dug under his driveway. He says, I put it in the driveway like a year ago, but now it's lifted up. You mentioned there's an arterial side of this, a neighborhood side of this. Chris, can he reach out to you, or who at the city does he need to speak with if he's had, property damage or property alteration or whatever it is? Like, who is the point person for that?
It is best to go to 311, because what's gonna happen is, it depends on what utility it is and what work and what area they're in.
Okay.
And then that can get funneled either to Chris, it can maybe associated with a capital project relocation, or it could be in our utility coordination group. So if it gets to Chris and it's not his, then he knows where to send it to, and he
He'll know
can
where to send it.
communicate that back. So 311, I know the council serves as 311 very often, if not more.
We just
but
escalate everything to Carrie Fothergill.
We try, and that's helpful. That was sincere.
I was just gonna say.
Right. But no, 311 is
Sure,
really our
okay.
best deal as opposed to, just because that, they get somebody's name and that person moves on, it's always best to keep it through 311 and we'll get it addressed. But no, we'll look for opportunities to let you know when there might be activities, but often we find out about it when you guys find out about it.
Okay.
Perfect. Sorry, we didn't mean to throw darts at you.
Welcome to our table. Please come back.
Just be aware the next time you show up.
Welcome to the city council.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you both, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 11, presentation and updates by the Tulsa Regional Chamber regarding economic development, tourism, and legislative advocacy activities.
Oh, okay, sorry, I thought there was a chair in between you guys.
You want to? That's mine.
Oh, good job.
I'll scooch.
Here's our friends from the chamber. Good morning.
Good morning, appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to get to come speak a little bit more about economic development, tourism, and then some of our government affairs efforts that we're working on right now. First of all, just want to say thank you to the council. We really appreciate the council and all the work that you all put in and how you are able to help us on the tourism and economic development side. It really makes a difference and it really makes our jobs easier and better. And so I just wanted to thank you all for that, for your support there. Also want to really appreciate the partnership with the mayor. We've been able to do a lot of really great things in the last several months, and so really that's working out well. So I think just having everybody aligned makes our job easier. It makes it much more helpful. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over. Patty Krassard, who's our Senior Director of Research, is going to give you an update of some of the things that we've been working on in the tourism space. Patty.
Thank you. So Renee McKinney, our president, is out of town right now. Last week, she went on a European road show with Grand USA. It was their first European road show, and it was the Great USA Road Trip. And so, along with several other Route 66 destinations, they went and spoke to journalists and influencers and media in Spain and Switzerland, Germany, just all of Europe, basically. And then immediately when she returned, she headed to DC for Destination Capitol Hill with the U.S. Travel Association. So that's an advocacy event, and there are congressional meetings this week, and it's really just policy focused, making sure that all of the federal policies in place are really supportive of tourism.
Councilor Velez, did you have a quick question?
Yeah, because, I've seen projections about international tourism understandably being projected to decline, was it 5%, 9% in the upcoming year, and that made me, and we have countries, including it sounds like ones that have just been potentially visited, that are like, don't go there because of things that are happening when people come in and out of our borders. I was curious how that maybe factors into your all's projections, or also like what our breakdown is of domestic tourists versus international tourists, if we know that, just so that we can have our heads around what are we projecting, how does some of that federal stuff affect us here, and it sounds like maybe hopefully it sounds like we've been kind of happy to be like, hey, tourism, it's good, we want it to happen, but yeah, I was just curious what that looks like for us locally.
Yeah, locally, luckily we don't rely a lot on international travel. I mean, ideally, 2026 would be a great opportunity with the Route 66 Centennial, but yeah, we are reading that Canada and a lot of our surrounding neighbors are more hesitant to come right now, but hopefully things will change. But as far as it goes here in Tulsa, I think we will be positioned very well.
Yeah, I
with the
imagine
Centennial.
most of our tourism was domestic to the US, but
It's a very small percentage that's international.
Yeah, and I think in talking with Renee, as they were in basically about a different country every day doing a Route 66 road show. And one of the pictures that she sent me, they stopped at a a gas station in Germany, and there was a Route 66 sign. I don't know if you saw the photos she sent. And so I think it's just important to be out there, making sure people know that we are open, the destination's open, we welcome you, and I think that's why some of these trips are important to be out there, especially now, to make sure that they know that. And then also on the advocacy side in DC, to make sure that we're working with the U.S. Travel Association and others to make sure that we're letting people know that we are welcoming travelers, we want travelers here, and we need those travelers here, especially with the Route 66 Centennial. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
But we want more international visitors. That's
Yeah.
the
I know.
that's the
We
bottom
do.
line is we want more international visitors.
All right,
Yeah.
so send that upstairs and further
We
up.
have some today
Yeah.
with the Global Alliance.
Yeah, we do.
Yes,
We do.
yeah.
We sure do. Yeah. Yeah, they didn't come the other week. Anything else you wanted to mention on events that are coming up?
Oh, I can't think.
That's all right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry,
No worries.
right off the top of my head.
All right. I'll turn it over to Kim Wilmus, our Senior VP of Economic Development, to give us an update on economic development.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, thank you. Just as a quick reminder, some of the areas that we focus on is really three main areas. So company growth, supporting those companies with workforce, and then really promoting the Tulsa region, working with our tourism partners, but really promoting it as well in connection with economic development. But just wanted to give that overarching area. We're off to a really great start this year. We've had 3 announcements. Again, talking about company growth, we want to take care of our own. So Lufthansa Technik is a company that we recruited back in the early 2000s. They've continued to grow. They have about 500 folks there, or will have 500 folks there coming. But because of our relationships that we've had with them, we were able to kind of help support and encourage that growth a little bit faster than what they had planned. So being well connected with their leadership is something that's really helped us move their expansions along. Other 2 were companies that we recruited to the area. Agile Space, we've talked about it before. Space is a big industry for us. We're going to really hit that hard in the coming months. We've got a space symposium that's coming up where a lot of the space companies throughout the U.S. are going to come together in Colorado, so our staff will be out there. But as we had, that is a rocket engine testing facility. There's a big bottleneck for that. There's 10,000 satellites in the U.S. right now. There's a projection of 60,000 satellites in the future. And so it's important for us to be in that space. We're hoping that that testing facility will help us bring even more companies that potentially manufacture into the area. The third was Six Shared Services Center. You've heard about that, I'm sure. We worked with that, got the lead back in October of 2023, had some site visits, worked with them with Partner Tulsa as they located here in this facility. So they will have up to 200 folks, so we're excited about that. And then, as I mentioned, in order for those companies and companies here locally to continue to grow, we want to make sure they've got the workforce. 2 of our programs that we're really working on right now, Tulsa's Next Gen Talent Program, which supports our Black juniors and seniors with professional development and job shadowing opportunities. We're recruiting applicants right now. We've got 120 applicants so far. And then we're also working with Tulsa Public Schools and helping to support those college-bound seniors to make sure that they make that final step from graduation to giving them the necessities for college. And then our goal is to really continue this promotion, as Patty had mentioned, but working closely with our tourism team. We think leveraging Route 66, we've got international site location consultants who play in that space, who love Route 66, love what that represents for America. And so we're going to work with them to continue to try to help and recruit and get consultants here in market. Any questions?
Counselor Dr. Rice.
Thanks. I think this is your first update to us
It
since
is.
you've come, so
Yeah.
welcome to the council.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad you're here. On the workforce development side, so great that TPS college-bound seniors. Are you also working with Union and Jeans?
We are working on another program, which I was going to report on next
Okay.
time. But we are working with kind of standardizing the process for employers so that we can retain those students, because it's difficult whenever a company wants to offer job shadowing or internships that they've got to go, every school has a different process.
Sure.
So our goal is to try to figure out how can we standardize that so it's easier for companies to help support and get kids on, because we want to get them early.
Right, and I remember the inauguration with Bill talking about like encouraging the members to have those internships available.
Yes, yes.
How is that going with the?
Yeah, no,
partners?
it's good, it is good,
Go
but
well. It's
it
good,
is
right.
very well, we're spreading it as far out into the region of whoever wants to participate, whatever
Okay.
school systems, but we had all the districts representatives from all the districts at a meeting to kind of help standardize
Yeah.
that system, that process. That's our first goal, is to get that going.
A lot of our districts have Jinx, Union, and even Bixby and Broken Arrow students residing in our district, so I was just wondering, I mean, obviously TPS is the major school district for the
Right.
state outside of Oklahoma City.
We had
but I-
representation.
Yeah, I
from
just wanna
them.
make
Yeah.
sure
Yes,
for,
they're all
for
invited.
those of us that have kids assigned to different schools, that they get the same opportunities.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Counselor Archie.
Well, I mean, I was gonna bring up that internship program as well, because I was at the inauguration. It was pretty quick after Mr. Knight made the announcement that it was filled with students who wanted to be interns. When is so I want to get kids from Webster in there for sure, because Webster is the high school that I represent. So we'll stay in touch so folks at Webster can jump on it as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Counselor Dutton?
Yeah, I would like to know on your Northside Neighbors Advisory Board, who is included in that? What Northside neighbors are we actually talking about?
Where are you looking? Yeah.
I don't know, that's,
It's in the packet.
Yeah, Bridge to the Future, and it's basically the explanation of workforce and talent strategies. It's on page 4. Workforce community engagement.
I can have Ruth follow up.
yeah, everybody, yeah.
I can have Ruth follow up with you.
Where are you, Counselor?
Page 4,
No, she's in this thing,
Oh,
this side. the left
sorry.
side.
Tulsa's Future, Business Attraction.
Okay.
Yeah, page 4.
Oh, it's on the report there, yeah.
yeah.
Sorry.
Through Ramsey's our VP of Workforce, you can have her follow up on what she's been doing on the north side.
Yeah, and what
We'd be happy to.
neighborhoods you've been
Yeah.
in touch with,
Yeah.
I would like to know,
Yeah.
so that I
Yeah, me
can
too.
also be in communication as well. That would be
Okay.
helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Counselor Dutton.
You done?
I am finished.
Okay.
Thank you.
So my thing is sitting now on the Teo board. One thing I would always say to those folks when I walk into any meeting, and I say this probably ad nauseum, is Buc-ee's, right? What Shields has done for Woodland Hills Mall, it has created more traffic for small businesses that may have lost some of that traffic previously when that mall started to go into decline. I know you're a regional chamber, so the outlet mall, Bass Pro over in Broken Arrow, these are all competitive markets. And as we compete to have these developments come into our communities, my stance has always been cash register developments always help stand up small business and help support in creating traffic for those smaller businesses that may struggle. In that partnership with Partner Tulsa, I hope you're taking that same stand that recruiting these jobs are great, growth is great, education is great to create those jobs, but also we still need to attract those cash register businesses to help stand up entrepreneurs and small business. So hopefully that's always on your radar.
Yeah, I will speak to that a little bit, because what we see the job in the Tulsa's Future program is we work on recruiting what we call primary jobs. And primary jobs are where you're bringing outside dollars into your community. So the example I always like to use is American Airlines. They're repairing aircraft from all over the country. They're flying all over the country. People are paying their fares from all over the country. And then they're paying, American Airlines then is choosing to do that work to repair those aircraft in Tulsa. And so it's bringing new dollars into your community, growing your population, employing people, and they have money to go spend at cash registers. And so we feel like our job and our Tulsa's Future job is to continue to grow the primary jobs, which then grows the retail pie. And so, and people can shop where they want to shop based on the assets that are there, like Shields and others. And so our job is growing the pie, and I think that's how we work hand in hand with Partner Tulsa then, is we're helping fill it with people. The people that are moving here, the people who are continuing to grow jobs, and then they've got money to spend, and we can continue to grow our retail base.
Yeah, I'll tell you that Buc-ee's sign on 412 is a poke in my eye every time I walk past it. So
I understand.
I'm gonna say that word as much as.
Yep, no, I understand.
I think you're
In
gonna
the
come in like a
venues that I can-
NASCAR
That's
guy
good.
and just have, well-placed
I see
passes.
people wearing it all
I
over
know.
Tulsa, so obviously it's popular
Yeah,
enough.
Did
It's
it-
iconic enough.
Did Tide Pros or someone do
They're
a
packed out.
pop-up, or did I imagine that?
That's
for
in
Buc-ee's.
District 8.
Somebody did a pop-up.
Yeah,
They did a pop-up for Trader Joe's a bunch of years ago.
Well, another
And then they've done for
organization-
IKEA,
Yeah, and I know, and they've
but not,
been
but yeah.
kind
Oh,
of compelling
IKEA,
and
yeah.
effective.
Right.
Come for IKEA.
But somebody did a pop-up
yeah,
for the
it's in,
retailer
it was in
that
Council District 8.
my
Yeah,
colleague to
yeah.
the east is very hip to get
Yeah.
here.
Yeah,
Any other questions
We
on
need it.
economic development?
no, we
Okay.
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good one.
So
I'm sure Quick Trip is excited about you having enthusiasm
Oh
for
my
bringing
gosh,
Buc-ee's
they're
to
two
Tulsa.
totally different models.
But on that, as we're encouraging, for those that
Market
are
competition.
watching, as we're encouraging companies to come to Tulsa, and we're talking about workforce development, I know that these companies are bringing their own moving to Tulsa, but as they grow, we're looking at improving the workforce within Tulsa, right?
Yes.
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 Yeah. Just so that we're not leaving under anyone out of the loop of it,
Right.
of being employed by these new companies coming to Tulsa.
Yeah, and I think just in terms of, when we look at business attraction, I mean, you want a full range of jobs in your community. So you know, whether we're talking about distribution, call centers, manufacturing, you know, engineering, you want a full range of jobs in your community, and so it's making sure that you're actually training for those jobs as well, and so that's important to us, yes. Yeah, thanks for asking, yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
And maybe this is gonna come
May come in Katie's
the next
report,
one, but, the childcare issue, and is that something when you're trying to attract these major employers, are we encouraging them to like stand up their own childcare facilities, or at least offer that as part of their relocation here? Is that a you
It'll be
question?
easier if they get the tax credit.
Yeah, I know, there's
Yeah.
some bills working through, and we got an update from Mr. Stone. Okay. That has been a business model, like in the Silicon Valley that I observed,
It
right?
has.
As all that industry came into kind of a sleepy part of the Bay Area, which was very ag. They learned very quickly, like in order to retain those employees, especially people who are early career, mid-career, that are also parents, you know, it helps to have on-site or nearby.
Right.
Or some kind of credit or something, so as we kind of look in those spaces, especially I'm thinking, aerospace is going to bring families, right? Or, create families out of people who are already here. We're gonna need some of that, especially if there are major facilities that are being built, to kind of put a little childcare option
I would
on
agree.
site. It'd be awesome.
Tax credits.
Well, they're working on it.
There you go.
I know.
Pretty sure.
Yeah.
Because we're cutting 60 million from the total.
And I gotta make comment.
Sure.
You make comment, no, I'm pointing at my colleague down there.
Okay, Bucky.
Not pointing at me.
About Quick Trip. Two totally different models. It's not impeding, it's competitive market, and it's an icon.
Free market enterprise. That's how we
Absolutely,
all-
so-
And that's your opinion.
Yeah, don't be sliding me. All right, sorry about that, Justin.
All right, with that, I'll turn it over to Katie to talk about government affairs.
Welcome to the first quarter of council now.
It's great, we love it.
Very good.
All the personalities.
Yeah.
That's right, it's great.
We were well behaved for the first 2 months.
Well, I'm happy to report that we have hit the halfway mark of the state legislative session, which is always fantastic. We have gone from over 3,000 bills to now just under 800 bills, which is much more manageable. But with that being said, many of our key legislative priorities are still alive, moving through the process, including the child care tax credit that you mentioned before.
That's HB 1848.
Yeah, it should be in your
Yeah,
list.
so we can encourage those from home who are passionate about that to, well,
Yes, and then
advocate.
1847 also, which is the sprinkler exemption. So both of those, I know you all are very passionate about, and so they are both alive, moving through the process, which is exciting. To speak to what the gentleman who presented before us was talking about, we have a bill to extend the sunset on the Quality Events Act. It was going to sunset, and that is one of our most important incentives that we have here, and so ensuring that that is continuing. Also removing the expiration date for the Route 66 Commission and allowing them to access those funds, especially with the centennial coming up. We have a priority bill that amends the Open Meetings Act. And it will allow for members that are video conferencing or teleconferencing from their private residence. If there's a in-person quorum, they don't have to publish their personal residence as an open meeting for the public to attend. Several other things. Tourism Development Act, extending that deadline, getting rid of the throwback tax. We have an exhaustive list on your page, so if you have questions about any particular bills.
Wasn't there one, and maybe I'm thinking of something else, there's a barrier for some employers to bring in interns because of insurance?
So Senate Bill 95 just
Okay.
clarifies that if you are an intern that is not being paid,
Mhm.
that you are not going to be covered under workers' comp. And so any concern about risk on the employer's side just clarifies that for them, which hopefully will allow them to
It's encouraging.
provide more
Okay.
opportunities. We had heard some
Okay.
feedback from businesses that they were just a little bit concerned about that liability.
Counselor Decorah.
Thanks. On the HB 2854, the 5-year moratorium on
Mhm.
geographic, is that to help us be positioned for a 4-year public institution in our?
So currently, we feel that having geographic restrictions in statute doesn't make a lot of sense. We think that you need to take that out of statute and put that in the regent's hands. That's what the regents are for, to make, the best choices possible for what our higher education institutions can and can't offer. And so it would allow for some flexibility. It would still put it in the regent's hands to make those decisions, but it would allow flexibility for which institutions can provide lower level classes as well as upper level classes.
Counselor Dunn.
Yeah, I'm looking at Senate Bill 7001 as well at the very bottom, so I guess that works in tandem with the,
Yes, so currently, Senate Bill 701 only allows that flexibility for NSU, Broken Arrow, but we believe that that is going to be amended to mirror the language that we just discussed. And so in that case, both bills will have the same language and would be that, regional approach rather than just for one specific institution.
I'm also curious on this throwback tax.
Mhm.
If you could just sort of explain to me what it actually means here, which requires businesses to remit taxes to Oklahoma on sales made if a company sells to a state where an item isn't taxed.
So this was something that was brought to us after our State of the Economy
Right.
Conversation. One of the economists had mentioned that Oklahoma is potentially being dinged when companies are looking at what our tax footprint is for a business, because if a business has a physical presence in Oklahoma and is selling goods to another state that isn't taxing those goods, Oklahoma is then taxing those, so it's considered a double tax. And so that was brought to our attention as to a reason why a business wouldn't potentially locate here, because it has an increased tax liability compared to other states. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Who's
Thank you.
carrying that? Do you remember?
Senator Rader.
Rader, good.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Decorah.
Thank you. I can't remember if amending the Landlord-Tenant Act was on the one voice, but am I accurate in
Yes.
saying there's nothing moving right now for this session on anti-retaliation?
So Representative Tedford had his bill as well. We had conversations trying to move that to a little bit more of a neutral. We felt that it was a little bit off balance. And so moving it to more of a neutral situation. And so due to just not being able to compromise on the language, it is currently not moving forward. But it's certainly something that we're still having conversations
But
about.
Representative Pays is also not moving forward, right?
Correct, correct.
Did both of them get, Hayes was an oversight committee, where did Tedford's get stuck?
Just in his policy committee, I believe,
Okay.
yeah. I think he just decided not to move it forward.
So
Yeah.
our best hope is that something comes back reasonable next year.
Correct.
Another year without protections.
Year 3, yeah.
Interim study,
Yeah.
again.
Again.
I know.
How
It's
many more
existing.
times do we have to like make the case for why we should
Well,
not be one
well,
of
maybe
six?
we need to try a different approach.
Okay,
I-
I'm down.
And we can have that.
Yeah. I
And
just
I-
worry
and I
as we
think-
start accelerating our units for
Mhm.
housing,
Mhm.
that it's not all gonna be single family,
Sure.
and it's
Mhm.
not all gonna be home ownership, and so we really do need to get our arms around this, because it is one of the number one contributors in our community and in Oklahoma, and I think now, if I'm not mistaken, Lawton and Norman are struggling as well. It contributes to homelessness or almost homelessness, especially in my district, so I will continue to amplify.
Well, and I agree, I'm sorry, can I interject on this?
Please.
Is there a way, because I remember running this.
I know.
And it was big, and because of the politics and to try to keep it all balanced, I'm just, instead of doing another interim study at the Capitol, maybe can the chamber help us organize a little study here? Because one of the things that was happening was the constant conflict between the big apartment owners and what I call the mom and pops.
Yep.
The mom and pop owners really, they don't have the deep pockets sometimes that the big owners do, but they want to be at the table, they want to be fair. And I'm just wondering if maybe there's an opportunity we do something a little bit more localized, that then we could help maybe put that language together.
that's a great idea.
And
Yeah,
maybe
we would
it's
be
not
happy
the
to
landlord tenant
facilitate
act, but it's saying
Something
you can't
else, yeah.
do eviction mills, or we come at it a
Yeah.
different way, because part of why it's existing is it's really easy to do.
Yeah.
So, I think that would be very strategic and smart.
I kind of like that idea.
We would be happy to
Because I
help
even
facilitate
remember
that.
talking with the courts when I was trying to run all that. I mean, they don't like having it. I mean,
No, it's such a.
So-
I mean, the goal is to lower it, so we could just look at
Yeah.
how we do it. So the habitability, residential habitability working group, which is a mouthful, is reorganizing. Counselor Bush is coming on, because Counselor Q left, and so we can maybe add this to.
Yeah,
okay.
But I'd like to keep
But I
Katie looped in so that we can.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
I kind of like
coordinated.
that,
That'd be great.
so we could coordinate.
Yeah.
Because I still hear from some of those little mom and pops, as I call them.
Sure.
Yes.
And we need to be fair to them as well.
Well, and especially as we're doing infill in Tulsa and coming up with
Right.
fourplexes and sixplexes and those things, we're gonna have more mom and pops, which is great, right? Passive income or long-term investments, but we've gotta get the balance. And we're on a fast track, right? I think I heard 6,000 units in 3 years, so
Yeah.
there's gonna be apartments with renters.
Well, I'll volunteer to help
Absolutely.
coordinate with you
Yeah,
on that.
I think that would be
You all
great.
could host something like that. I think that'd
That'd
be
be good,
good.
yeah.
Counselor Dutton.
Yeah, so I wanted to piggyback on all of that because I think that with the growth that we were talking about and the companies that are coming in at the airport in my district, that piggybacking on the whole housing issue is really important because I'd like to see that multifamily, even locally owned housing structure to accommodate those folks that will be moving in. And I really want it to be something that would bring up the district as well and incorporate investment
Yep.
right there.
We agree that housing is extremely important as we recruit companies in, no question, yeah.
That's the strong tie to partner Tulsa, I think, and some of the stuff we'll be doing with like Housing Forward.
Counselor Bellis.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about, and I know this is what you were kind of already laying out, Councilor Dector, right, how we can ensure that the investments we're making locally are sustainable and we're not having people then cycle in and out of those housing rapidly, being destabilized, which that directly ties into employment and their stability to access that. So I'm also thinking through how we can better, paint that picture, that policy work as well about those very direct economic and employment ties of stable housing and why it's important to help both landlords and tenants have stable renters, stable housing, and thereby stable employment as well. So I'm just thinking through how we can paint a better
Oh, and
holistic
it also
picture.
lowers truancy that we've learned.
Yes, of
So
course,
it's
it's
all
school
connected
outcomes.
to this
Yep.
workforce and all of that.
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
Counselor Bush.
Yeah, which kind of, thank you for that lead in on truancy and absenteeism. No, this morning at the Brookside Business Association, we got an update and a presentation from TPS, and of course, we all know that our public education system has been a major issue sometimes when we're doing economic development, and I am sure you all are hearing their updates in their trends and all of that, because it was super encouraging, especially since everything that has happened. And it was very exciting to see they're trending that they may have 73% of their high school students graduating this year, which is more than doubled from
That's
what
really
the
good.
previous 2 years. So, and they're, with Kathy Dodd coming with that experience from Union, setting up those 3 high schools with those dual tracks. So I just make sure that we continue that conversation and to figure out a way how businesses, our local businesses, can help with some of the issues they're still facing, mainly truancy and absenteeism. Yeah, for the, as Katie knows, the funding formula, I asked about that because of the timing of when you have to have the butts in the seats.
Right.
And it's definitely been a hit on their funding stream, when those butts aren't in there on October 1st and then that other. I know, so we need to be sure that we continue to have those conversations, and the stable housing, of course,
Yep.
will affect a lot of that as well.
Counselor Decorah.
Thank you. So, Mr. Stone is tracking bills. We actually have Marissa Gomez tracking bills even closer to home. I'm assuming my colleagues have certain ones we're tracking, but if there are ones on the One Voice here moving, I don't know when we get to see you again. So if there's some of these that you need us to activate, could you let us know?
Absolutely. Yep.
We also have constituents that are very eager right now to do something.
Yep.
And so I want to channel that energy positively into, these things that we know they care about and how to do it. So we're, putting calls to action out, but also saying things like, a personal story, not a form
Yes.
email,
Yes.
don't go through a third party, so that it can be effective.
So we create essentially one-pagers on all of these bills that we can absolutely share with you all, that can
Okay.
help you,
Yeah.
just
I'm just
have
thinking
the
about the-
information you need to.
Yeah, like the
gather
childcare one, we
those.
have a working group
Yep.
that has stakeholders in the childcare space that we've helped, understand our permitting and revising ordinances, and so we can reach back out and say, hey, we're getting close. Your personal story about why your childcare home. I mean, we have Counselor Hall Harper, she's not here, but the lady that babysat her came to us, like she's still in business,
Yeah.
and kind of shared with us, all these kids that she's helped take care of and where they are now, and how requiring sprinklers would really be a detriment. And so I think that like personal story is way more impactful than, this kind of esoteric idea, and nobody wants kids to be unsafe in a home, but also is it right and reasonable to expect a house to have sprinklers in every room?
Yeah.
No. So, just so we can help with nudging people in the direction, or if you think it's gonna sail through, then we hang back.
Well, you just never know.
Right.
In that building, but to that point, so.
You're asking for common sense.
That's
a big
That's why I
ask.
run for election
There
here.
you go, that's right.
So most committees,
Think that's
so we're
close
back
enough.
in committee work,
Right.
and most committees have been canceled this week,
I
which
saw.
means next week is going to be a beast of a week.
It's
But
concentrated.
just so you all know, the next major deadline is April 24th, for all bills to be out of committee. There is an earlier deadline on the House side because they have instituted this new oversight
committees.
committee. For April 10th, I have a feeling that might magically get pushed, a few days, like it did the first time around. But just so you know, I mean, it's going to be very fast-moving next week. And so I can get you all of that information on those bills.
And Counselor Gilbert can probably speak to this better than me, but we have been very active around the mental health funding advocacy, and I know that's on the One Voice as well,
Yes.
so. I think we're down to $20 million.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, we've gone from a $60 million gap to 20, which.
Yeah. I'm hoping we can get a supplemental, so we're having those conversations for sure.
Okay. Yay. It's been a busy
Justin?
week.
Yeah,
on you.
a couple more things I wanted to mention on the tourism side. We'll be hosting Sports ETA here in April, which is the meeting planners for the sporting industry. So they're gonna get to come experience Tulsa. We're really excited to have them here because they're making decisions on behalf of of what cities they decide they're going to bring some of their events to, so that'll be great. Had a really successful Big 12 wrestling with record attendance. Thank you to Councilman Bingle and Councilman Archie for coming out and handing out awards. The heavyweight champion that won that night from OSU actually ended up going and winning at the NCAA championship a couple weeks later. So that was kind of neat to have that tie there and get to visit with him afterwards. And then obviously the Convention Center Hotel still continues. We're excited about that. I don't have a whole lot of other details on that. Renee's working point on that, but just to mention, we're excited about that project continuing. It's really, really important to us to make sure that happens. So a couple events that I wanted to mention is we got a legislative briefing breakfast coming up tomorrow, or Friday morning rather. State of the Tribal Nations is going to be on April the 15th on Tax Day, Congressional Forum on April 23rd, and then our One Voice DC fly-in on May 12th through 14th. And then looking a little bit longer term, we always love to have the council at our intercity visit, which will be October 6th through 8th, and we'll be going to Salt Lake City this year. So we'd love to have you put that on your calendar as well. But as always, we love the dialogue. We appreciate the meetings that you all take with us and all the support that you give us, not just here, but also behind the scenes, and cannot thank you enough for that. And any other questions, happy to answer.
I love that y'all are quick to hand out comments, but let me flip this around. But just like the wrestling event that you talked about, that last match came down to the Big 12 championship.
It did.
That was equally exciting.
It was.
Not just handing out the awards.
Yeah, yeah.
Seeing those kids, their bumps and bruises and cuts, I mean, you can tell how intense those matches were. So thank you for including us and seeing us as a valuable partner. So you're, just want to pay that compliment.
Thank you, Councilman, appreciate it.
And we've secured the Big 12 for the next, till 2028. So we just signed
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so they'll be there year after year, so
Yeah.
that's fantastic.
It's a big deal for Tulsa.
Thank you.
You guys are working hard and we appreciate it.
Thank you all, appreciate it. All right. Have a good
Thank
day.
you again.
Thank you.
Okay.
You.
Yeah, thanks, Councilman.
Finally, on to item 12, presentation by city council and staff. City and council staff regarding an overview of the city's past programs, studies, and initiatives related to housing and key points for implementation of Improve Our Tulsa 3 housing funds. These poor folks have been sitting here waiting patiently.
They were just advocating for eviction avoidance. I saw mom.
I know.
Yeah, we gave people whole new jobs back there.
I did?
No, we did.
Oh.
We did.
I've heard an assignment
Want to go
happen.
ahead and
Yeah.
come to the table so we don't have to ask you to come up here
We're
later?
gonna take the Paul Zachary approach and just get a call.
Oh, okay, okay.
You don't want to sit with us?
Gene, you don't
They're
want to
like-
come up here?
They nominated Travis.
They want
because-
the dramatic entrance.
No, it's Wednesday, you're not wearing pink, but you can sit with us, it's fine.
Travis is like, not my first time at the rodeo.
Good morning.
Oh, Jean is brave.
Yeah, Jean's brave.
support.
Okay, awesome.
Sarah Davis, council staff.
Travis Hulse, Housing Director.
Jean, do you want to introduce?
Gene Bolmash, Senior Advisor to Mayor Nichols on Housing.
So we have a presentation for you today, and some of this won't be new information, but we're kind of starting the next phase of our housing discussions. So in today's presentation, we're really going to be looking back at the last 2 years of work, and then beginning a preview of what implementation could look like, and really beginning that study of implementation. And so as you all know, there's been quite a bit of work around housing, and last week we presented you an outline or a timeline of what our continued discussions could look like. So we're in that highlighted section today, where we'll really be looking at our past work and also the key decision points going forward. So going back in time about 2 years, we've had several initiatives going on. So we had the 3H task force, which was the Housing, Homelessness, and Mental Health Task Force. Also during that time period, we've had 2 significant assessments and studies in partnership with community partners. On that, we've had a discussion of housing funding as well as action steps, and ultimately
The last time we probably talked significantly about this was in November with the passage of the Improve Our Tulsa 3 resolution. And I should say significantly at this table, it's been continued to be discussed for many months since then on implementation, just preparing for those next steps. So just to review for the public, in probably late 2022, but really the work started in January of 2023, the 3H Task Force began its work. And this was really following a time period where you had some significant city funding investments. I think it was somewhere around $15 million into work around homelessness efforts. But yet you kind of continued to see the issue grow and the need grow. So there was really an effort around wanting to make sure that we were strategic in how we were addressing this crisis, essentially, and moving forward. So lots of community partners, the city joined together to create the task force. During that time, there were 26 meetings. Over 50 stakeholders were included in those meetings. I think in the great community response around that was nobody ever said, no, we won't come talk to you about this. In fact, it was one of the more easy things to schedule because everybody said yes. Everybody convened around this problem and the table. There were also public meeting that was held and quite a public process tracking the work on the website. One of those things, though, that came out of this meeting, which really informed later work, is no matter what space you worked in these stakeholders and in these nonprofits and public safety, people just said, you need to produce more housing. And that was a large takeaway from that, which is really why you saw some of the policy develop as it did.
So one of I think the first questions that we were trying to answer within the city of Tulsa is just understanding what was our overall housing market demand. I think we've all generally understood nationally housing was a big topic in conversation, but trying to really wrap our arms around, key numbers and things that we could really start to, know this is what we need and then begin to build a strategy. So the first thing that was accomplished through the citywide housing assessment was identifying a need for 12,900 units over the next 10 years. Several of you have heard me say this to you at this table, Councilor Bengel's favorite part. Many of you have probably heard it just in other ways, but this was kind of the starting point for the conversation to launch us into, what then kind of follows and we'll get into. So the 12,900 units, it was more than just a number. It was showing us where that need kind of lives within the different income levels, whether you're going to purchase a home or if you're going to rent a home. It kind of broke all of that down so that we could really have a better understanding of what we needed to tackle moving forward in those next coming years. To put that into a little bit more kind of perspective, we had the number of units, but then we also needed to understand what did that look like from an investment standpoint to support that level of housing demand. So that big number at the top, the $370 million over a 10-year period of time, so $37 million a year, again, started to frame the conversation of what are we as a city, but even expanding outside of that with our partners within this community, the state, other agencies and organizations focused on housing. What are we trying to accomplish from a funding standpoint? So this was new money. This isn't dollars that we already kind of see come through different public programs that we offer already at this city. We'll talk about a couple of those later, but things like the Downtown Development Redevelopment Fund, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, that was already kind of taken into account, as well as some of the programs offered through the Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency, like our low-income housing tax credit program. So new money, $75 million is what, we've ultimately kind of jumping forward into the future, committed to this program and this, effort through the city, but so we need to figure out a way, obviously, in how we kind of leverage and expand that to meet the overall need of what is 370 million over that 10-year period of time. I always like to share this, just again, to try to help. 12,900 units sounds like a lot, and it is, but I think it also helps to just kind of put that into context a little bit as far as, well, what are we doing now? Like, how many units are being permitted year over year? And so this chart is essentially showing you, if you kind of reference that needed to meet demand, that orange line at the top, that's where we need to be year over year. You can see we've hit that mark a couple of times. We're generally on average lower than that by about 400 units year over year. If you think about the project that the Tulsa Housing Authority is doing up at 36th Street North in Peoria and Vision Comanche, that's about 540-ish units. So you're talking about an Envision Comanche level project every single year. Another way to think about that for a lot of our growth that we're seeing in other parts of the city with kind of your single unit, single family residential subdivisions, you're looking at typically, 50 to 60, 70 acre sites that are producing about 300 units. So you're thinking we need at least one of those in addition to what we already do on average every year. So it's doable, and I think that's the point, is not to say there's no way we're going to accomplish it, this is way too far out of our ability as a community. It is certainly something that we can and have done over past years.
So at the same time that we are developing, we've got the housing strategy coming out, the 3H task force starts to meet, the mayor and the council also at that time are beginning to develop the Improve Our Tulsa 3 package, which we all now know today resulted in $75 million for housing, the most significant housing investment that the city's made in a capital package. But at the time that you all were developing that, what we didn't have was the results of the 3H task force. We didn't have the second study that Travis will talk about in a little bit. So we wanted to make sure to leave that flexibility to have the best use of the money, but to also include the community and the data. Our little graph here messed up. It's not the best one. In your backup, there's a better one.
Share.
So, the Tulsa Housing Initiative is sometimes what the documents were referred to as, or not the documents, the funding sources were referred to as. So 75 million is that big piece of the pie. We should play a game to see if you can guess the other small pieces. But those included $5 million in American Rescue Plan Act funds, the Downtown Development Redevelopment Fund, Home ARP, and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. All that had various purposes. Some had geographic locations, but really it's not just the 75 million. There were additional funds.
Can I ask you a quick question on that? I know it's only 2%, but the opioid settlement at 2.7, was that the direct payments from the city?
Yes, at that time, that's the direct payments.
Okay.
And I don't believe at the time that the housing initiative went out, I don't think we'd even made our first application to the state.
Okay,
Yeah,
got
yeah.
it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, so as we launched into kind of better understanding of what the need was in terms of number of units, number of dollars, we as a city got to a place of committing then those dollars. We had already kind of been working on the strategy and understanding what is it gonna take to essentially get to that, both of those goals, accomplishing both of those goals. So at a high level, at a very high level, the Tulsa Housing Strategy was kind of a follow-up piece to that citywide housing assessment, was also completed by the same group, Development Strategies out of St. Louis, Missouri. So they had the familiarity with everything that was kind of happening in Tulsa and really helped us to look at and understand what other cities are doing. So you'll hear us talk a lot about in the task force and in different conversations how we met with different cities throughout the country who were having success and similarly, tackling similar problems. So Greenville, Charlotte, Columbus, Ohio, Omaha, Nebraska, those were kind of the 4 communities that we spent a decent amount of time, and we continue to talk to them and ask them more and more about their programs and what they do. But generally speaking, we recognize that there's a need to not only produce new units, but there's also opportunities to facilitate growth in redevelopment of existing, older commercial areas. We also know that it's going to require that we spend a fair amount of time looking at our own internal processes through development. What can we do to improve that experience? What can we do to make that better? And it's something that I think to say on behalf of the Development Services team, I think they would say is something they're always evaluating. And similarly with the Tulsa Planning Office, zoning comes up a lot in these conversations. You all have been a part of addressing those changes and, something we will continue to do. So housing strategy is ultimately what gave us a lot of those priority actions and started to help us think through those different ideas and things that we would really need to, start working on. So having those conversations with those different groups helped to begin frame this resolution that Sarah mentioned early on that was developed, and what do we ultimately want those $75 million to go towards. So as we got into that a little bit more, we talked about the guiding principles around the need within Tulsa and kind of the local context. Columbus, Ohio has different needs, although housing is a need, is different than Tulsa's. The same could be said for any of those other communities that we talked about. So I think as we kind of got around the table, and not everybody in this room was in the position that you are in now at that time, started to really talk about what is important in Tulsa as we frame this $75 million. So that's where these guiding principles came from. It's things like, how do we not over-concentrate any particular type of housing in any, geographic area of the city? How do we provide diversity and variety and different affordability and price points? How can we leverage our dollars? I already said that we have committed now $104.2 million. We need to essentially triple that, maybe quadruple that. What are the partnerships that we can bring online, and how do we do that? You've heard a lot of good news around the work that Jeff and his team with Housing Forward is starting to really bring to bear. Different partners coming to town, such as the Housing Partnership Network, the CDFI Friendly Tulsa team. So these are different kind of creative financing tools and entities that didn't exist previously, so there's things happening there. So we talked a lot about those types of partnerships and things that we needed to really focus on. And then some more of the specifics to what in Tulsa we're dealing with in terms of how can we focus on utilizing existing infrastructure, our water, our sewer, our parks, our public safety, so we're not overtaxing and loading our system for everything that we do and provide as a city. So as we developed these guiding principles, I think that's always kind of stood as our reference point, my reference point for thinking about how we ultimately deploy those dollars. And then we kind of built into these different funding programs that were included in that resolution, how that $75 million breaks out into different types of funding programs. A lot of this came from, again, not only visiting with these different communities, we had a lot of conversations with local developers, things that they're experiencing as they're, looking to help accomplish, these goals, talking to them, getting their insight into what types of funds make sense, what programs make sense. These are funding targets. I think they reflect, a lot of the need and emphasis around housing. and I realized I'm just like talking with my back to.
No, you're good. I'm
Yeah.
listening.
So, really is an important place for us just to begin to carve out and frame what those programs look like as we move forward. So that's kind of the point that we're at this place, at this juncture. Sarah kind of mentioned, what we do now as we kind of move into really now implementing and getting dollars out there and building those units that we desperately need.
So just to give you a preview kind of other discussions that are gonna come forward, obviously there's a lot of collaboration and background work to continue to do on this, but we did wanna highlight some key decisions and implementation points that will come up over the next few months. And so appropriations, the incentive policy around some of these funds, and bonding are those 3 points. And so I'll go into a few of those a little bit more. On the bonding, we're gonna save that for a future discussion. You have that scheduled coming up, and so we won't go into detail there. But just to frame this a little bit, when Improve Our Tulsa 3 passed the Brown ordinance, because that was in the sales tax portion of the package, had this language in there. And so this language this is why you passed the resolution in November that outlines those buckets. It also just emphasizes that on an annual basis, the council does have to appropriate funds as you do with any other capital package. On this. I'll call on you, Counselor Dr. Counselor Dr. Wright. No, I just have a couple more slides.
I don't need
but
to
if
interrupt
she
you.
has
I'm
a
just
slide,
trying to build on
yeah.
She just wants to build on it.
Yeah.
She just wants to make a list.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Sorry, I meant to not
Yeah.
interrupt, but here
No,
we
no,
are.
no, no.
That's okay. I was
I went on too.
question. So,
You already have.
I'll just put everybody on.
Yeah, that sounds good.
But I was on before.
We go around the horn.
yeah.
Rock, paper, scissors. I'm kidding, I don't care
Ms.
what I'm on it.
Davis.
So you had, so just for those who weren't here and for the public, so this resolution has been passed, but really how to implement this resolution is where we are at. Part of that implementation, there's another ordinance called the Economic Incentive Policy Ordinance. The council passed this in, maybe also in 2023. And this is around economic incentive policies or incentive policies even outside of housing. So it's for funds that are derived from sales tax ordinances and offered to third parties. It applies whether it's administered by the city or by an outside entity, and includes some minimum requirements for those policies, essentially the process and the review procedures. The ordinance does list some example funds that were in existence at the time this was passed. This was not in existence at the time this was passed, but it does say, and all future packages. And so the economic incentive policies, how that works is a policy is drafted that does come through resolution through the council and the mayor to adopt those. So you did that, I think a couple months after you passed this ordinance for some of your other funds that you're more familiar with. But this too will come up in this process. And I think that is our last slide. You will just see as our discussion continues, that's why we're having some of the future discussions on our timeline, and I can go back to that one. When we are talking through with some of those cities, now it's gonna be slow on me. That's to help inform how do we want to administer funds. When we were talking about bonding, it was obviously contemplated in that resolution that you could bond some of the funds if you wanted to. And so that's why we've laid out this calendar and schedule this way to help you, give you the right information to make those best decisions. Do you have anything else to add?
Okay, so I
Travis says
wrote
thank
down-
you too.
I wrote down a sequence, and if you got a complaint,
Wait, put me at the end.
File it with the city.
No, put me to the end.
All right. Counselor
What
Be-
you wish for, Counselor.
Counselor Bellis, you're first.
No, put me at the end.
You, no, no, you take your turn now.
Oh,
Oh my gosh, no, but there was so much content.
Remember, we do have lunchtime coming up.
I know, my
and-
interest in
Yeah.
pizza is really
And a
out
1
strategy,
o'clock.
we're having it at the end.
We have a 1 o'clock, so I want to be thoughtful of that as well.
Yeah, I yield my time at 1 o'clock, but,
You have lunch coming.
Okay.
I think
No.
it's, I think
Look,
it's,
what's the
I think
strategy?
it's in-
I yield my time, but potentially will
Let's move
interrupt
on.
Councilor Dr. Wright.
All right, go ahead, Counselor.
Oh, I
Thank
thought I
you.
was up there.
Thanks
Just
for the
said, I wrote
for
down
the
sequence.
overview and update.
Yeah.
I'm the only one sitting here that was on the task force. Counselor Lakin wasn't here, so I'm glad that we got to walk through it for those of you who weren't even in the building. So task force is sunset. I just want to say that here because I'm getting a lot of questions from the public about what's going on with the 3H task force. So I've explained to them that that was Mayor Bynum's initiative, and we did our final wrap and kind of baton toss in January. With that question has come, we never got our second town hall that the task force promised. So I'm being held to account for that, and I don't know, as we move into this new phase, if there's going to be public engagement. I would like for there to be. If there's not gonna be a formalized process, then I guess I'll just include it in my town halls. But those are the two questions that I've been getting, so I think we need to be explicit about those things. And if there's another plan, communicate as soon as we know.
That's a good point.
Yeah, definitely.
The first one was really good.
Yes, and James Wagner was the star of keeping everyone calm. But people felt heard, and, you know, it's kind of how we launched. But everything else has just been kind of announced through media and whatnot. So I don't know what that looks like, but I'm just elevating and amplifying those questions. With the federal in the pie chart, those are already like ARPA dollars, those are already federal dollars that have come down. Do we anticipate any of the changes at the feds now impacting kind of our strategy or what we're hoping to do?
I mean, at least not what was shown
Okay.
on the screen.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that's kind of like, yay,
Yeah.
yay for us.
Yeah.
Okay, the other thing I just wanna, and I've said it a bunch of times, I'm gonna say it again, when we talk about 12,900 units or 13,000 units, I have not seen yet a breakdown of unit size at each income level, and I do have concerns about a lot of studio and one-bedroom apartments kind of ticking boxes of we're on our pathway, but families can't live in those.
Right.
So I want to know at some point what the strategy is for like those bigger units and not just for home ownership, but for rentals in multifamily spaces. Which means we have to have courage to continue to approve things like townhomes, things like, you know, these alternative stock that Susan has presented to us that sometimes when it comes to zoning, we all of a sudden lose our courage on. And I'm just saying that over here. But I also would love to know what the inventory needs to be so that we can educate the public who wants to push back on these things, and that leads to us voting no a lot. And then on the affordable capital A housing and permanent supportive, will those be income-based or based on pricing? Is the question I continue to have. So, they don't have to be answered today, but I did want to say that for all of us to be thinking about. So, right now, as I understand it, the strategy has been, when we talk about affordable housing units, is on a pricing model to make sure that people who earn $30,000 to $80,000 a year, could afford to rent. But that is not the same thing as saying you are eligible to rent at this lower price point. Those are two different things. So I don't know that that's been made clear to everyone. Just because they're priced for people that earn $30,000 a year does not mean that people earning $30,000 a year would necessarily qualify at the property over someone who's earning $80,000 or $100,000 a year. So I just want us to be mindful. Thanks.
That was a long list.
I know, I was scribble
It was really good, though.
While we went.
Counselor Bush?
Okay, you all love hearing me. Infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure.
Echo.
We are so far behind the 8 ball on our aging infrastructure, so I'm gonna be selfish here about D9. We don't have any land to grow, so you're just gonna tear down what we already have and build new. And So I just had a town hall meeting a couple of weeks ago about a project that wants to go in at 31st and Yale for the mid-level price range, if you will, apartments, and of course, the neighborhood, yeah, the NIMBY issue. But the bigger concern is the water, sewer, and streets. And so this 25 million that you have in here, I don't know where you got that number. It's obviously, boy, not even gonna make a dent probably. And then I saw in the presentation, the prioritization. This is a bigger discussion. I just wanna put this on your list. How did we get to the 25 million? We know it's gonna be short. I know that in talking with Eric Lee with our water sewer, we're already $1 billion down to really do what we need to do with our infrastructure. So I'm all for the 13,000 houses. I cannot wrap my brain around how this is gonna work with our infrastructure. So, I know, it's a big question and issue.
I'll answer it in just a very minor answer. So out of the housing.
Besides no money. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
out of the housing strategy, actually, infrastructure was the one bucket that wasn't in that housing strategy. That really came from additional stakeholder engagement. And you're right, and when you look back at those guiding principles, how do you really make those infrastructure dollars, what is our best use of those? Because we know there's use, right? You just said the use. So what is our best use of those dollars? And different communities do it differently. There are infill projects, there are, when you talk about infrastructure, and it's not an infill project, you're talking about your entire public infrastructure. Your public safety infrastructure, schools, all of those things. And so, no, $25 million will not cover it, $75 million will not cover it, which is why anybody in the community is welcome to join in this effort to get us up to that $370 million number. And so that's kind of the discussions around infrastructure, but there was quite the need, and I do remember people who are better at housing financing than I am. There is a financing issue, I think, with developers not being able to finance some of the cost of the needed infrastructure. So that was also a reason to include that. Okay, do you want to add anything on infrastructure?
No, I mean, just, that really covered it. But I do think that it has been an emphasis, and that's why it's one of the top 1 or 2 of those 5 programs that we've identified. I mean, it comes up with nearly every project anymore, whether it's an infill situation or, you know, something. Yeah. So we want to make sure that as we're having these conversations, we can address the needs within our community, and we're not hamstringing ourselves and saying, well, we have 75 million, but it can't be used for all of these things that you really do need it for. So trying to keep that as open as possible.
Which I appreciate, and I think going forward, as we continue to have town hall meetings and we continue to have these build-up, we need to be able to address that infrastructure, because that is the #1 complaint and pushback from residents. I mean, and they're gonna show up to our council meetings or to the planning committee and try to kill some of these projects because they're afraid of the street collapsing or the water and sewer not being able to handle it or whatever. I mean, I just think we need to really take a look at that and figure out how we're going to fund it going forward, and so that we could be successful.
And I'll just add, that's part of the reason why we're having these conversations, to have this, get this feedback and this input before we go too far down a path. And secondly, there's been conversation about leveraging the 75 million. So to your point, 25 million in infrastructure isn't gonna do it, 75 million in housing isn't gonna do it. So we need the ability to leverage that, to Travis' point, 3-4 times. So hopefully we'll be able to get close to that.
One of the things that some of us were in a meeting about yesterday as it goes to street projects is learning more about how Public Works is layering in these different initiatives. So that if at 31st and Yale, there's already a IoT 2 or 3, or even Fix Our Streets for that area, kind of looking at those dollars and then what we could bring in. So I was encouraged by hearing that, because until yesterday, I thought it was really just focused on like curb to curb, or maybe just right under the street, but not layering in vibrant neighborhood initiatives or neighborhood conditions, stuff we're talking about, and either greenfield or infill projects from the housing strategy.
That's what I'm hearing.
Oh, you heard about a capital stack? I
Sounds like
would
a
never
capital
use
stack.
that phrase, but you can.
Sorry,
But yes.
Counselor Fowler's not here, so
I think
just
it
wanted to
might be
fill that
helpful
in.
though, to look at where those, tax package improvements are. Do you have any for that corridor specifically?
Yeah, it's not in the near
Okay.
future. And I've already talked to ODOT, the Broken Arrow Expressway is a complete disaster, and in the next 40 years, which I'll be dead, maybe they'll put it on the 8-year plan. Because the ingress and egresses in Midtown, they're not only, they're a public safety issue, but it's cost prohibitive to access to that. So as you're building in Midtown, you're gonna put more stress on those horrible ingresses and egresses
Yeah, as the other
into
half of
VA.
Midtown, I do echo all of this, especially with when you have all these established and more historic neighborhoods where the big opportunities are largely infill. That's where, because okay, I'm reclaiming my time. Sorry, I'll be so quick, I'm gonna talk so fast, but no, one of my things I was gonna ask about is, the obstructive stuff that happens at our table when it comes to zoning and rezoning that's needed for some of the needed infill to happen or some of those smaller projects. And it can be really hard to sit there and have to balance the constituents have very legitimate infrastructure concerns, and I'm trying to balance that against trying to add in housing, but who am I to tell them that their extremely aging infrastructure is not a concern, right? And that we're gonna move forward on a certain housing initiative when I can't, oftentimes I'm not equipped to speak to if it's really gonna stress that infrastructure or not. So also one, I'm naming that if it's not going to, we need the data that shows that. But if it is, we have to be able to address that when we go to do these rezonings.
Well, it would have been helpful if I could have said that we're going to improve this water and sewer. I mean, Quick Trip's going in on the corner. I mean, there's a lot of development happening. Trinity Woods is improving, 31st Street, not a Buc-ee's. So this whole 31st Street corridor
That would
is,
generate more revenue to do all of this.
yeah, but there's going to be a lot of opportunity for development and new tax base and all of that. And I think if I'd had a little bit more promising information on some of the issues that this old established neighborhood has with the infrastructure going, yes, don't push back on this development because as these dollars come in here in 2028, we're going to improve that sewer line or we're going to do this. Standing there and telling them that the ingress and egress on Yale is going to be that way until long after you're dead is not a good answer.
Yeah.
But it's the truth. But, I mean, we need
So
to.
it kind of sounds like you don't have the right tools to encourage housing with the community.
Correct.
Because
I can't give
you
them.
can't help problem solve for the things that they're bringing forward.
I can't.
Sorry,
And it would
colleagues,
be
but I
nice
need
to be able,
move
even
this
if it's a
discussion
future
along and get to our
project.
other colleagues. Counselor
Yeah,
Dutton?
sorry.
So, I do have a few questions, I'll try not to be long-winded, but I may be.
Well, pizza's waiting.
I know.
We can
I'm-
eat
I'm-
on the phone.
We can't afford.
Share your sentiment of 40 years, I'm kind of on a timeline too, so. I was looking at the percentages here of the from the extremely low to the low income, and that's 59% of the numbers that are coming up, which in total 6,200 housing units. And then we have to the moderate income 17%. So both of those combined would be 76%. And so the 33 actions on the path to home, what are those actions?
They're on Path to Home on that website, but I think as a task force said that it will be on the city side to really encourage the affordable and workforce. We think that
Right.
the private sector will come through with market rate and luxury. I think I'm not misspeaking on that.
Well, and probably most of those are families in that income bracket, and so we're looking at the multi-use. So I wanted to tell you thank you for bringing that up with unit size and what we're looking at, because that's a big proportion of apparently what we are needing. And then you mentioned geographic location for the Tulsa housing, the 104.2 million in the graph. What does that mean? Are you using NCI data for geographic location,
You mean on
the income?
Do you mean on like the DDRF funds?
Yeah.
Yeah, those have a restriction. and you
DDRF
probably know
is
those
restricted to
restriction.
downtown.
Yeah.
Those are,
Yeah, I saw that.
That's just that
That's a pretty
funding
good
source.
chunk too, though. Okay. And
That's
then-
the only one that we currently offer through the city incentives that is geographically constrained. The others are not, but
That's
I
to
think that
try
was
to
the
get
comment.
conversions in downtown, or
Yeah.
just these multifamily that you've seen come into downtown in what, the last 5 years? 10 years?
Well, they can come to District 3.
Right, but there's been a strategy to revitalize downtown specifically,
I
which
get
we're
it.
seeing, because right now downtown does not generate the sales tax revenues that it should for a city of our size.
And that dates back
It's
to
District 7 that's doing
Vision.
that.
yeah, these
That's
are,
why we have so many apartments.
that original funding source is several years old, and
Yeah.
that's based out of the capital program that it came through, that was voted on.
Well, and I expect over the 10 years that these numbers are going to fluctuate as well with the housing numbers. So I was also looking at the guiding principles and the distribution to encourage a mix of housing options citywide. So that process, we're going to include every area, correct? I mean, we're going to assess and distribute so that we're not, as has been in the past, we're not condensing these
That's number one.
socioeconomic, yeah.
We do not want an over-concentration of wealth or
No,
lack of
exactly,
wealth in any one
exactly.
part of town.
Concentration of poverty.
Yeah, thank you. The
Evenly
socioeconomic.
distributed.
Yeah, thank you. So, those were my comments and questions. I just
Yeah.
wanted to kind of
Oh,
I
get
think we're
more
really
detailed down.
incentivizing mixed
That's how nice I am.
income too. Mixed
It's your
income.
turn, Counselor Gilbert.
Okay.
That's how nice I am.
Thank you.
No, I mean, is there, I just wanted to make sure that I was on your list.
Oh,
'Cause I
it's
kept
your
being-
turn now.
I think you're definitely on his list.
100%. As we're moving forward on this, and I'm gonna say this throughout this whole process, can we make sure, as we encourage developers to come in, that we hold them accountable with their project and plans of action, instead of having these developers come into town, start a project, and then stop for a couple years? I think that is one of the issues that has put us back so far. And I really think that we need to hold these developers accountable for what they are supposed to be doing. So, as moving forward, just please, 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 start asking for their plan of actions, and make sure that we are following their plan of actions and holding them accountable, because I have a few different projects in my district that have been ongoing for the last 4 years, and it's still vacant. It's just sitting there, unoccupied, unfinished, and it's an eyesore.
Yep.
So.
The one at 36.
There's,
Yep.
41st.
No.
there's several at
41st.
41st, yeah.
21st, I
Yeah.
thought it was at 36.
Yeah.
well, and the
40%.
problem is, when you get someone who comes in and says, we're gonna be the first to convert hotels to housing,
Right.
and then they don't,
Bingo.
it's really hard to justify a new project, because all we have to look at is the one that's not happening right. So I want to co-sign, amplify, and say, I don't know what the accountability measures are, it's usually when we have incentives in place. But I think at some point, we also look at the permitting and say, if we don't see movement on this, you can't go from permitted to do a project and then you get on the naughty list and you're becoming a chronic nuisance,
Right.
that's not gonna be
Right.
helpful for anyone.
Right. So if you apply for a permit and you have 3 months to get it taken care of, to get that permit fulfilled, if they haven't even started on that, they should be accountable to come back and file again to get it done. And we need to make sure that we follow up with them, hold them accountable, and
Offer
not.
technical assistance,
Right,
if
we
that's
need
the
the assistance as
issue,
well.
yeah.
Not just having it sit there and become a blight property. So,
So I'll
and
triple
I'm gonna be
stamp.
making that comment throughout
I'll
every
triple stamp
single
no
one of
erases
these,
and no
so
take
get
backs
used
on
to
that,
it.
because some of the zoning developments that we've approved for housing have not seen turnover of dirt, and that's problematic. because they make the applications for the zoning. And to kind of Counselor Bush's point, when we're talking about infrastructure, there's lack of infrastructure where we're talking about key strategic growth areas that can't be grown because of lack of infrastructure. So I have 2 apartment complexes that are going into my district. I'm all for housing, but there's places where we could have these mixed-use pre-approved builds done if there was infrastructure in place, even in Counselor Hall Harper's district where there's lack of infrastructure. I love that we want to move this initiative forward, but if we're not making the key investments on infrastructure so these developments can happen and so these alternative housing solutions can be created, we're just sitting here admiring the problem, and it's going to continue to happen. That's when these developers come back for a rezone, saying, I need to go from an RS4 or an RS3 all the way to an RS5 because they've had to make that infrastructure investment.
Right.
And it's pissing off, quite frankly, the abutting neighborhoods because the density has to be created to justify the investment. So I want to be very thoughtful when we're talking about the number of 13,900 over and over and over. We need to hold, just like Counselor Gilbert said, the folks who applied for these are held to account to do the projects. Even the space over there at the Wyndham, we've talked about that a million times. You know, the feasibility study. I want pre-existing buildings that are already existent where the cost is low to potentially create additional housing. Those are prioritized above brand new builds. Let's use those spaces that we have and prioritize those above building a brand new project specifically. Because I would expect those spaces would cost less to rehabilitate and re-engineer, unless they're just not sound and have to be level. And I would expect someone has already done those studies to determine that, so.
How would you do that?
Sorry, I'm jumping off my soapbox.
For multi-family housing though, because the units would be small, renovating a motel.
Well,
not
No,
necessarily.
you can convert
They would-
rooms.
You
You
can
can convert them into multifamily?
Yeah, you can
Because we
convert.
actually have another one, the Holiday Inn, which is taking advantage of a preservation tax incentive. And they have to maintain that, and those are gonna be rentals. So,
Or even office space can be
Yeah.
converted.
Yep.
so I just wanted us to be very thoughtful, and I think I said that at a meeting that we had over in your office, Joe. Because
Yeah.
I don't wanna build something unnecessarily. And then for it to be abandoned, or to go into the discussions of Title 55, where it's having to be abated. And we run into that problem again, so I'm jumping off my soapbox. Counselor Virtue.
Yes, I'll be very brief. Just a few things, or just 2 things. The Housing Acquisition Fund, maybe just to piggyback on what everybody's been saying, there are blighted properties in Red Fork and Carbondale that I think could be on the top of the list as far as just converting and getting those housing numbers up. 13,000 units we want. Of course, I'm concerned about the permitting trajectory. I'm curious about what happened in 2013 that got us, all of the permits. Do you all know? What happened in 2014?
Not at the top of my head. On those years, there's typically been a larger multifamily development, if I'm being just honest about why the number. So it wasn't that we saw like a huge ramp up in single-family production.
Okay.
It was that we had 1 or 2 fairly large multifamily projects built that year.
Okay.
Like Green Arch was built that year. I'm just thinking through some of the
It was
downtown
a major,
apartments.
and so I just, when I hear things like this, I just try to think through maybe what questions would my neighbors ask or whatnot. So I want tons of housing in Tulsa. I want all 13,000 units to be in the Tulsa city limits. What about our suburban neighbors? In our plans, thinking about the housing units that we need, have we considered the potential growth and development of, Jinx, Broken Arrow, these other, and how does their housing strategies or plans may or may not affect the demand that we need in the city.
Yeah, so the housing strategy really kind of looked internal to the city of Tulsa. There absolutely housing is a regional kind of, I'll say, issue, or however you want to kind of phrase that. And so, I mean, we know that Broken Arrow, Wasso, Jinx, Bixby, whomever continue to grow, and that's all a part of this. We really just have not spent as much kind of time focused in on what's happening there, but more just what we can do internally to address the number of units that we know we have a market demand for here in the city limits.
All right.
That look on your face on this. Are you sure you don't want it?
I'm good.
Are you good? Okay. Counselors, any other questions?
Thank you.
Travis, Sarah,
Thank you all. It's good to be back.
We'll be back soon.
25 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, colleagues, for the thoughtful discussion. We are on item 13, and we are adjourned.
Nicely done, Council.